Well, hello and happy Tuesday to y'all. My name is Crystal Sky, and if you're anything like me, you find yourself drawn to true crime cases, so that is what we're going to talk about. If you are also drawn to true crime and you want to feel better about your own makeup skills at the same time, you should absolutely subscribe, and let's hang out together every other Tuesday while I will take a deep dive look into a true crime case while slapping on the old clown paint. And yeah, just before we get into it, just want to apologize again for having to delay this video by a week. Like I said in my announcement, you may or may not have seen, my father-in-law had a stroke and was in the hospital, and then we also found out he has dementia, so it's been quite a chaotic couple of weeks over here. So yeah, Jeff has had to go and kind of stay with them for a little bit. They're like 3 or 4 hours away. So yeah, it kind of screwed up the filming schedule and all that. But yeah, what I'm going to do, so this is what I'm going to do, check it out. I will go ahead, obviously, right, and we're going to watch in part 2. Next week, I'll go ahead and post part 3, so we'll, do back to back. And then after part 3, I'll go ahead and go back to every 2 weeks. Sorry for kind of the chaotic schedule. It's just, yeah, life is pretty cray right now. It's a little stressful and chaotic right now, but yeah, we're getting through it. And yeah, I think what I'll do also is probably do film a batch of videos, so that way I can have them in the arsenal, and I'll just have to edit them, so that way I can try to keep on schedule. Alrighty, with all of that said, let's continue our deep dive look into the Dana Ewell case. Alright, if you'll remember, this was a trust fund little baby who had his family murdered simply to get the inheritance. Yeah, and there's so much to this case, and it's just wild and bizarre. Remember, I am reading this book, Catch Me If You Can, for the case. I got probably, 50 to 60% of my information from this book, and the other part of the information I got from, articles, newspaper articles mostly. And yeah, this is the book that I used, and yeah, I will give my review the very end. And as a reminder, this was a requested case. It was requested by @HeyHeyYou. I believe I saw your comment that YouTube made you change your account or something. I know YouTube gets really wonky with people's accounts. It's really weird. But I can't remember. I think you said your name was Christine. I can't remember. I'm so sorry. I meant to check my comments before I started filming, and I totally forgot. Like I said, it's been pretty chaotic lately. But yeah, thank you so much for suggesting this case, because man, this was definitely one that I had to keep researching, and I wanted to know more and more and more. And I think this will probably end up being a 6-parter. Yeah, 6-parter. I think so, because I finally finished it, and there was just so much information, guys. I mean, you know how I roll, man. I want every nitty-gritty detail that I can get. So yeah, I'm all about that research. And a quick reminder before we get started. Come on, guys, we're talking about true crime, so obviously, right, viewer discretion. We're talking about pretty intense stuff. Going forward, I don't think there's anything too graphic. Maybe when we get to the trial there might be. I'll let you know. But I think the only warning I would have would be language. Yeah, it's going to be quite a few cussing in this case. There's quite a few quotes with cussing. I'll try not to, but I can't help it. I'll probably drop the C word, cunt, because that is what Dana is. He's a cunt, and the audacity of this a-hole is, it's just, there's no words. There's just no words. So yeah, with all that said, let's jump into part 2. So part 1, right, we went into our victims, the Yule family, Dale, Glee, and Tiffany Yule, and then we went into the son of the Yule family, Dana. And if you remember, right, he was cosplaying as his dad at college and saying that he was the one that made all the money and stuff. If you'll remember, it was pretty wild. And so we ended part 1 with, right, the very beginnings of the investigation, the very early stages where they're trying to figure out what happened, try to recreate the crime, right? And we ended with the alarm technician, like, commenting, like, oh, I mean, the alarm was working fine, but unless someone knew the code, like, yeah, I don't know. And that's where we ended, right? We're in the very, very early stages of the investigation, so we'll go ahead and pick up there. And we're going to pick up, if you'll remember, in the end of part 1, Sousa, Detective John Sousa, who was the head detective on this case, got a call from someone named Peter Tapia, if you'll remember. He said his brother Mario had gone to school with Dana. And so he had called up Sousa, Detective Sousa, to, you know, like, let him know, like, yo, like, I've got some inside scoop on, like, Dana and, you know, who he is as a person and whatnot. My brother Mario went to school with him. So let's open up part 2 with Sousa following up on that. So Detective John Sousa decided to call up Peter's brother, Mario Tapia, since he was the one who actually went to school with Dana, and just wanted to kind of, yeah, again, like, get a vibe check on Dana. So Sousa gave Mario a call, and again, if you remember, early stages of investigation, so they're investigating, like, the whole family, including Dana, the lone survivor, right? And just trying to get a beat on this guy, like, you know, who he is, what his character is, all that good stuff, right? So Sousa ends up calling Mario to kind of see what he has to say about Dana. And Mario echoed what so many others had already told police, like, already this early in the investigation, that Dana was obsessed with money. Quote, on a scale of 1 to 10, it was like an 11. He didn't feed on it, but it was a big interest of his. Money won't make you happy, but it will buy the Porsche you want, the ski lodge you want. He said that Dana's philosophy was that, you know, money made the world go round. And he wanted to do big business deals like RJR Reynolds. And yeah, of course, I looked up who that was. I was like, who the hell is that guy? He's a fucking tobacco executive. So, of course, Dana looked up to a tobacco executive. And then Mario did also tell Sousa that Dana did have another side to him. Quote, now, there was a darker side to him. And if you'll remember in part 1, we've kind of already dipped our toe into that aspect of Dana's personality. So on Thursday, April 23rd, Marlene Reed, if you remember, which was Dale's secretary, went down to the station to do a more thorough interview with Detective John Sousa and his partner, Detective Ernie Burke. They wanted to interview her at length because, remember, at the crime scene, she was there and she kind of gave them a little snippet of, like, how she had come to the scene and found out and all that. So she was coming down to the station to give a more thorough interview. And the detectives, remember, wanted to sort of investigate Dale's business ties as a motive. Like, could this have something to do with Dale's business? Marlene had been Dale's secretary for like 18 years, right? So she's obviously going to know, like, the ins and outs of the business and stuff, right? She said Dale always stopped at the office on Sundays when he returned from Pajaro Dunes. She repeated what she had the day that the bodies were found, that she had last seen Dale that past Friday before he left to go to Pajaro Dunes, where the family had a beach house. And if you'll remember, right before Dale took off to the beach house, he got a phone call from a client who was upset, right? There was a billing dispute. And Marlene was saying, yeah, that was the last time I saw Dale. It was that Friday before he was about to leave, and he got on that phone call, and it was, like, not a very good phone call. Dale had a heated argument with the Aerostar plane's owner, who was only agreeing to pay $250 of a $2,000 repair bill. Marlene told Sousa and Burke that this dispute was taking up a lot of company time, and it had really angered Dale on principle. She also elaborated onto how she had come upon the crime scene. Remember, if you'll remember in part 1, she said Dana had called her Monday night, but she hadn't heard back from him, and until she, heard the commotion going on that Tuesday morning, she hadn't called the house or checked in or anything, right? So she elaborated a little bit more to the detectives on, like, how all of that went down. She said after Dale hadn't shown up to work on Monday, she was a bit worried, not, like, overtly concerned, but she was a tad worried, like, it's kind of weird. He didn't call or anything. It's a little odd. And it was that Monday evening that Dana called Marlene. Quote, he said, do you know where Dale and Glee are? I told him I'm assuming something happened with your grandmother health-wise, and they went up there. She also commented that she thought it was weird that Dana used his parents' first name when talking about them. She thought that was a little odd. She said Dana responded by by saying that it was his grandmother who had contacted him and said that she hadn't seen them or been able to get a hold of them. Quote, when he told me that, I had a very horrid foreboding. She said that she told Dana to immediately call a neighbor, have them go check on his parents, and call her back immediately if the neighbor reported anything wrong, right? But Dana never called her back, and so she assumed that everything was right. I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, she told him, hey, if the neighbor reports anything suspicious, give me a call. And Dana hadn't, so she's like, okay, must have taken care of it then, right? But she said when Tuesday morning came and Dale still wasn't at work, that's when she started getting a little panicky. And so she phoned Dana back up. Quote, I asked him if he had called the neighbor, and he said it was too late. I got angry. I said timing could be critical. I said, I'll go investigate. Tell me where the key is hidden. Tell me how to turn off the alarm. And she said at that point, Dana did phone up the neighbor, which I believe I forgot to mention his name in part 1. The neighbor was Jesse Knapp. That was the neighbor who Dana had called to check on his parents, and was the neighbor that met the Ewell's housekeeper in front of the home. And as Dana did that, her and Bob, remember Bob Purcell, Dale's top salesman, drove over to the crime scene. She was then asked about Jack Whitman. If you will remember, in part 1, he was Western Piper's auto mechanic, and he didn't have a very good reputation, right? He was known to be an angry drunk. And so obviously, right, that's definitely going to raise some eyebrows when you're trying to find out, a motive and suspects for this murder, right? So they asked Marlene about Jack Whitman, and she repeated what they already knew, that he was a raging alcoholic and had a temper, and she said that personally he frightened her a little bit. She also added that when she phoned him up to inform him of, the murders, she said he asked, quote, were they killed when they were coming home? How would he know that? They then asked Marlene about Bob, the salesman, right? Because again, you got to look at everybody in the early stages of this investigation, right? So they asked Marlene about Bob, and she described Bob as a devil-may-care type of guy. And, they argued and bickered occasionally because, we're all human and that's just how, things go. But, quote, they had their disagreements, but Bob would never have the nerve to do anything violent. So since what Marlene had told them about Jack echoed, what a couple of people had already told them about, they were like, okay, we got to bring this Jack guy in, at least for an interview, right? Gotta cross off all potential suspects. But before they could do that, they got a call from the Fresno Air Terminal Police. And they were informing the detectives that a private plane in the care of Western Piper had just been stolen. Western Piper was in a fenced industrial park, and it bordered the tarmac of Fresno Air Terminal, right? Like the regular airport. And apparently Bob was the one who had phoned this in, and inexplicably, for some reason, when he called to report that the plane had just been stolen, he said the killers of the Yule family just stole the plane. Yeah. Now, it turns out one of the owners of the disputed Aerostar plane was the one who actually stole it. He had apparently come in on a commercial flight, right, into Fresno Air Terminal. He looked over and saw his plane was, chained up, I don't know, the blocks or whatever, And he's like, oh, you know what? That's my plane. I'm gonna go over there. And he just, undid it and flew off. Just flew off with his plane. And now this whole thing really pissed off Susan and Burke because, obviously, right? They get this call, we're getting this call, the killers of the Yule family just stole this plane, and it was in the care of Western Piper, right? So of course they rushed down there, and right, it was a big fat dud. And it is said that they were very annoyed that Bob had reported that the killers of the Yule family had stolen this plane when he had no evidence of that. Why would you do that? So when they got back from this, false lead, Detective Christian Chris Curtis informed Sousa and Burke that he had just gotten off the phone with a Fresno physician. And this physician said that he was friends with Jack Whitman. He said that Jack told him he, had overheard this heated argument that Dale had that Friday afternoon, and that Dale supposedly had a, quote, look of fear on his face that Jack supposedly said he had never seen before. The physician also said that Frank Lamb, remember the shyster who owned Western Piper before Dale, blamed Dale for the loss of his business, if you'll remember, because he was convicted of drug smuggling. So after, getting this phone call, they're like, all right, we have to go interview this Jack Whitman guy. Let's cross him off our list and, see if he's a suspect or not, right? So they went to Jack's home and they interviewed him. And Jack, he admitted openly that, him and Dale argued quite a bit, but he also argued with, Bob and Marlene, too, and it wasn't, anything personal, He pointed out that he had been Dale's service manager since 1973. So obviously, right, he worked well enough for him to, work for him for that long. But despite, working for Dale for so long, he didn't really know the family all that well. Just that Dana was, quote, a good kid, and Tiffany, quote, a beautiful girl. Because remember, ladies, our looks are the only thing that matters. Jack also told the detectives that they were probably wasting their time chasing any sort of, drug smuggling rumors or anything like that. Because that was one of the rumors going around, right? Because of the whole Frank Lamb thing. And he was like, nah, I don't believe that for a second. Dale was clean. He wasn't about any of that nonsense. He said some drug dealers had once tried to, put blame on Dale for something. But yeah, Dale was, quote, always clean. I wonder if it was that case that Dale had to testify in. Jack told detectives that Friday, he was the one who had actually taken the initial phone call with one of the Aerostar owners. And when he sensed that, it was going to be pretty heated and dealt with things far above his head, he passed the phone over to Dale. Jack said Dale was the only person to ever stick by him, and that Dale had even given him a key to the cabin that the family had at Shaver Lake. And this was to make up for Jack having to come in on his day off. Jack said that he had actually phoned up Dale that past Saturday as he was at his beach house, and said, quote, I want you to know I love you and your family, and I'm going to stick by you for the duration. He was contemplating, retiring, but had decided against it. When asked what he did that Easter Sunday, Jack said that he spent all day at home with his wife installing a sprinkler system. He claimed to have no knowledge of the layout of the Yule home, didn't know anything about the security system, the alarm code, anything like that, and said that he didn't know how they had died. He said he had guessed it had something to do with the Aerostar dispute, and so when he heard that the family had all been murdered, he was like, oh, it must have been when they came home, and it was about, that whole billing dispute. That's what he thought. Jack did not own any guns other than a pellet gun. He didn't hunt, he didn't target shoot, he wasn't really a shooter into guns at all. They asked if they could take his prints to be eliminated, and he happily agreed. And, despite, his reputation, it was very clear that, Jack Whitman was not their guy at all. And he had had his alibi not just verified by his wife, but by several people who had come over to the house throughout the day. So as Susan and Burke were interviewing Jack, back at the station, Detective Curtis got a call from a Bank of America branch manager. She said she had been approached by a Ewell employee a few years earlier, an employee by the name of Bob Purcell. He was inquiring about receiving some sort of financing, some sort of loan, so that he could buy Western Piper. But the branch manager told Detective Curtis that when she called up Dale to, get some more info, Dale told her that, no, she was mistaken. His business was not for sale, and he didn't know what she was talking about. And when she told Bob this, if that's what Dale said, she said he was, quote, livid to the point that he was shaking and trembling. And a few weeks, before the murders, she had run into Bob on the street, and she asked, oh, how are you doing? How's Dale doing? And Bob just replied, quote, he's still getting rich. And she said, yeah, he was pretty bitter and angry about it. And yeah, she was like, I don't know if this is anything, but just thought you should know. You should be aware. Meanwhile, at the Yule home, Detective Melinda Mindy Ibarra was with Dana as he was picking out some clothes for his family's funeral. He was picking out clothes for them to be buried in. While they were there, Dana pointed out his father's Ruger 357. It was still in its case, and it was stored in a shelf on top of the closet. And, police didn't think a 357 was involved, but, as you can guess, they were pretty, embarrassed and annoyed with the fact that they had even missed that. Come on, man, you're supposed to be sweeping this home where a whole family was slaughtered, and, how do you miss a weapon that, you failed to collect? On Friday, April 24th, police came out publicly and told the press that Dana was not a suspect. And they had concluded this after interviewing him. Quote, he was never a suspect. As part of our investigation, we have talked with him and with many others who knew the Ewells, and this was according to Fresno County Sheriff Steve McGarrion. We have to be careful and make no mistakes. The only pressure I am feeling is wanting to put the person who did this in jail for a long time. The bottom line is we want to find out what happened in that house. Agent Zent also told the press that he was going to volunteer on his free time to help the police on the case. So this same evening, right, that is publicly announced that Dana is not a suspect, crime scene work was all completed, and Detective Ibarra handed the house over to Dana at 10:30 that same evening. She had spread newspapers over the bloodstains that were still there because, the police don't take care of the cleanup at all. And she recommended a cleaning service for Dana. And as they did a walkthrough of the yard area, she noticed that Dana removed a key from beneath the tool shed awning. And he was trying to be all stealthy and sneaky about it, but she saw him. And so she thought that was weird. And she told Dana the technicians cut the lock off of the backyard gate. And this really pissed Dana off. And then he shouted that he wanted an itemized list of things that they took. A memorial service for the Ewells was held the next day on Saturday, April 25th, 1992, and over 400 people attended, which, not really surprised when we went into their background, right? Especially Glee and how connected she was to the community. If you remember, the then Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, Marvin Baxter, was actually a really good friend, and he actually did the eulogy at the funeral. The Ewell family was then buried in Belmont Memorial Park. And of course, at the funeral and the memorial, detectives were also there, right? Duh. Want to see who's showing up and kind of get a read on people, right? And for Detective Sousa, he was especially interested in Dana, because he's still trying to get a read on this kid. He thinks he's really weird, but again, right, he's got to be really careful. Right? Because, if he's wrong about this, he's going to accuse this kid of, murdering his family when he just lost his whole family, right? So he was really studying Dana and trying to get a read on him. And he just thought it was very weird that there was no emotion from Dana at all. None at all. And Sousa saw only 2 instances where Dana seemed to show some sort of, outward emotion. The first was when, I guess Dana got super upset about some broken light fixture, at the house. I'm not sure if this was something Sousa was told or if he told Sousa or what, not sure. But the second time was after the service, and Marlene had come over to Dana, and Dana got super animated and complimented on her outfit and her jewelry, and he took her hand and excitedly said, quote, he said, "Oh my God, who got you that rock?" Then he turned over my hand to admire it some more. I was embarrassed for him. It was so odd. Bob was there, of course, as well, and he too thought Dana was behaving really odd. Quote, after the funeral, there was a reception. I say reception because it was very much like a wedding reception. Dana was shaking everybody's hand and making comments about people's jewelry. I didn't see any pining or emotion. That bothered me a great deal. So on their way back to the station from the funeral and the memorial service, right, Sousa and Burke are talking. And Burke is pretty convinced that Dana needs to be looked at. He's definitely suspect number 1. Well, Sousa was a little more hesitant for, the reasons that we discussed. In fact, I guess Detective Curtis, when he first met Dana at the crime scene, I guess he had made a comment about nah, this kid's dirty. He's got something to do with it. He immediately had that read on Dana. But yeah, Sousa was still hesitant because he just didn't want to, all eyes are on this case, guys. This was a rich, prominent family, very well known in the community. Fresno's not a huge area anyway, and a family being assassinated in their own home. Yeah, it was a huge, huge story and topic of discussion. So eyes are on the police in the investigation, right? So, I understand Sousa's hesitancy here, right? But he was having a hard time even convincing himself, because he was thinking about everything he had seen about Dana's behaviors, thinking about that interview they had with him, thinking about Dana's weird, insistent demand on an itemized list of things that were taken. And he was thinking about, there was this rumor going around that Dana supposedly spread that the police had robbed his father's body of money in his wallet. Apparently Dale was known to carry at least a couple $100s in cash in his wallet, but when they, examined his body, there was no money in his wallet, and Dana was going around and telling everyone that the homicide detectives had pickpocketed his dad's body. This was despite the fact that Glee's body still had her $30,000 watch on her wrist that wasn't touched. So yeah, just thought, so Sousa's thinking about just all this stuff, and he's just man, he's not even really convincing himself, but he's we have to eliminate every other avenue first, right? Quote, I sure as hell have never seen anyone like Dana, but it doesn't mean he killed them. Shit, he wasn't even around. But they decide, you know what, let's do a background check on Dana, and let's just see what comes up, what we uncover. The day after the memorial on Sunday, Dana attached Dale's ski boat to Glee's Jeep, and he headed up to Millerton Lake with a keg of beer and a whole group of friends, and he had a party. Now, right after the murders, Dana did move in with one of his uncles, not sure who, but he did move in with one of his uncles for a couple of weeks. But within a month after the funeral, Dana was living in the home where his family was assassinated. And in fact, guys, when Dana moved back into the house, the cleanup wasn't even completely done. Like, he hadn't even got it completely done yet. There was still, like, blood on, like, walls, like splatters of blood. There was still bullet holes everywhere, even brain matter. Yeah, there was still this stuff like on the walls and stuff, and Dana just moved right in. He gave a friend named Michael Poindexter, we will talk about him a little bit more later, but he gave his friend Michael a tour of the home, and yeah, Michael would later comment that he saw this on the wall. He also said that Dana told him, quote, they will never solve this case, referring to Sousa and Burke as dummies. On Monday, April 27th, Alan Boudreau examined the bullets. If you'll remember, he's the one that would sort of analyze the murder bullets, the murder weapon. Like, that was his whole area of expertise, and that's what he was focusing on, was determining the murder weapon that was used. So he was able to determine that all 6 of the bullets that were recovered were all fired from the same weapon. And through a bunch of testing, Boudreau was also able to determine that the murder weapon was an auto-loading weapon, not a revolver. And he was also able to determine that Dale's Browning 9mm gun, remember that one was still missing, was not the murder weapon. And just real quick, I just noticed as I was doing this, like my bruises here, I swear to God, like Jeff's not beating me or anything. I've just been roughhousing with my dog, my husky, and it's like I just bruise super easily and I'm super pale. So yeah, that's what this is. It's just my dog and I roughhousing. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So anyway, let's get back to it. So meanwhile, going back to the investigation, remember they wanted to dig a little bit more to Dana, do a little bit of a background check on him. So Detectives Ibarra and Sousa went up to SCU to talk to some of Dana's professors, see what they thought of him. The first one they met was Dr. William Pryor. And he told them, quote, I teach in the philosophy department and head the honors program. I knew right away where Dana had plagiarized his paper. It was a professional work. Yeah, Dana had plagiarized a paper in a business ethics course. Yeah, and of course Sousa commented on that. And Pryor just responded, quote, ironic, no? When I confronted Dana about it, he didn't seem particularly concerned about the morality question. When Dr. Heckman flunked him, Dana tried to obtain a late drop from the class so he could avoid an F, but nobody fell for it. This was typical of how Dana would attempt to manipulate the system to his own end. Now, when they asked, like, okay, well, how did Dana react to not getting his way? Dr. Pryor said, quote, after he was suspended from the honors program, he took it quite hard, and then he wrote me that letter. Oh, Dana sent me a long letter. Frankly, I found the contents frightening. Now, when asked if Dana, had threatened him in the letter, he just explained, quote, not directly, but it was a disturbing correspondence. I referred it to a colleague of mine, a practicing psychologist who works with violent offenders, and he stated the person who wrote the letter was in dire need of counseling. Dr. Pryor said that he had seen Dana after he had sent the letter. Quote, oh yeah, as a matter of fact, Dana came to me and said he'd been accepted to Princeton. He asked me to return the letter. I told him I'd misplaced the original and handed him a photocopy. Now, of course, Dana had not been accepted to Princeton, and Dr. Pryor did not get rid of the original letter. He still had it. And he told the detectives, after he consulted with the university's, legal department, making sure, everything was, kosher and stuff, he would turn the letter over to them. And now, of course, I'm going to read you that letter, right? That's how I roll, dude. And now let's read this, bizarre letter that Dana wrote. And it's just so indicative of this little prick. He never takes accountability. There's always an excuse. There's always reasons, right? So let's go ahead and read Dana's letter that he wrote to Dr. Pryor. Dear Mr. Pryor. Yeah, Mr. Pryor, not doctor. I am writing this letter to you because I want you, the philosophy department, and the honors committee to know the pain I have and am still going through. If I had to say anything to anybody, I would say that I am guilty of the hardest crime according to the law community to prove, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Right now, Dr. Pryor, I am standing psychologically about 2 feet tall. I have spent numerous sleepless nights lying awake thinking about what has happened. Now, I know what it means when people say that the feeling of guilt is more stressful and harder to overcome than the inhibition of committing some type of wrongdoing in the first place. My anger at myself has caused me to do several things. I have experienced all sorts of thoughts and feelings about my life. At times, I become religious. At other times, I get so enraged that I jump on a bike in 105-degree Fresno weather and pedal a bike for several miles or jog until complete exhaustion. I have worked out until I can't lift another pound of weights, and then I look at my distressed face in the mirror for a long time and ask myself, who am I? You, Dr. Pryor, are a student and graduate of philosophy. Perhaps you can understand what I am telling you and make something of it. During my freshman and sophomore years in high school, my obsessive personality and strong desire to succeed caused me to stay up all night to study for a test, even though I had been studying all week. I wanted to do as close to perfect on those 6-page legal sheet tests as possible. I wanted the highest grade. I wanted to do things that no one else had done for that Christian brother. I wanted these things. And after putting my nose to the grindstone for hours on end, I got them. On occasion, I would get very nervous the morning before a test when I had studied all night. I would eat some breakfast, but my generally weak stomach when it comes to eating couldn't take it. I often vomited right before I took the test. I went to a doctor and he said that my obsessive behavior was exceeded by my physical limitations. Regardless of my then physical conditions or limitations, I succeeded in high school very well with that behavior. My perfect grades and good test scores are what got me into Princeton and the honors program at Santa Clara. Convinced I could run my business and attend school at the same time a lot easier in Santa Clara, I made the choice I did. I know I ask myself, why did I just give you my life story in the paragraph above? I really don't know why. I just want to talk with somebody about this. Just as my stomach gave out in high school, my body just can't take any more of this psychologically induced stress and pain. Worrying about what I did at Santa Clara. Frankly, I am just on the verge of snapping. As a philosophy teacher, I am sure that you know how powerful, impressive, and all might the human will is. There is nothing stronger than an extremely motivated man. Such a man can start wars, kill millions, save millions, or permanently change the earth. I have felt some of what human adrenaline can do. It is the most powerful weapon man has. In my fits of anger, I have taken my body beyond what physical limitations I thought existed before. From what I have said so far, can you understand what kind of life I am currently leading? I have all sorts of strange thoughts lately, Dr. Pryor. I see movies about serial killers, people committing suicide, highly immoral men, and what psychologically stressed people do. It is a bit frightening at times. I don't want to do anything else wrong. This whole thing is just ripping my sanity apart. I always need to have a serious goal in front of me to stay focused. I have always loved structure, cleanliness, and excellence. Putting my nose to the grindstone is what I do best. Just as I sit here sweating and typing this letter, I long for someone to bring out the best in me. It was statistics professor Dr. Feinstein who said to me on the first day in his exact words, "You guys are terrible. What do you think you are doing? This is going to be the hardest class you will ever take at Santa Clara, and if it isn't, come tell me and I will make it harder." It is a genius like that that will elevate the capability of Dana James Ewell to perform to new levels unsurpassed before. You know what I mean when I say that the classes where all you have to do is read, memorize, and spit back data are the easiest in the world. That's why I think there are programs like the honors program to go beyond wasting all that time. I came to believe during freshman year that a class without Dr. Feinstein's sentiment was really a class not for me. You can look at my record and see where I thrive. Getting the highest grades in honors econ 1 and 2, it's what I live for because it proves that I mastered the material. Is that so wrong? Can I stay up all night just for the personal satisfaction of knowing that I will get that one extra question correct? Sure I can. I guess one would call this behavior as that of a perfectionist. The papers I wrote in econ, religion, English, computer science, etc. show how Dana J. Ewell can perform. That's what I am proud of, not my infantile, disgusting actions last quarter. I wish you would slam my head against a window and crack a few pieces of my skull. Then yell at me and tell me how immature and ridiculous I am. A poor excuse for a human being. That's what I long for. I've done it to myself 1,000 times this summer. I wronged myself. I think of myself at 40 years of age saying, yes, I too was once stupid, just as every man is at one time or another. Just like Ted Kennedy got in trouble by cheating on a Spanish exam at Harvard, or Congressman Joe Biden plagiarized a speech, etc., etc., etc. Just like Dana Ewell messed up once at Santa Clara. I look at Ted Kennedy and other successful figures for comparison. I look at them and see that they turned out successful even after their monumental failures and good judgment. Can I do the same? I think I can. I need to prove myself a man to you, my teachers, and to Santa Clara, and to myself. It is time to get up from this. I have been living in a personal hell all summer, and I can't wait to get beyond it. I got an F in ethics and business, which means I need to take it again in order wanted to graduate. This time, no one will be disappointed. I've heard a lot of people, friends, family, teachers, and myself. This is not to mention the original author, Mr. Brady. I'm going to call Mr. Brady tonight and explain again to him how I feel about the lack of deference I showed him last quarter. Our society doesn't like it when one man does so much damage. That's why the majority of America supports the death penalty. I have tried to reverse roles and ask what I would do if I were a teacher and a student broke this moral code. Well, of course I would give him a huge fat F, just like I have received. Then I would batter his head against the wall until the part of his brain that made him do it is shaken loose forever. I would belittle that student to the point of mental breakdown. In my case, I have been doing most of the belittling. Then I would ask that student if he or she intends to ever be a person worthy of living with any kind of decency, self-respect, and consciousness. If that student has endured and understand these concepts, such as I have, I would consider the notion that the best way to get rid of a cold is to sweat it out. I'm going to come back to school in a week, and I'm going to put my nose to the grindstone like I've never done before. I am not just talking about spinning my wheels, but looking at what Maximum Drive and potential Dana J. Ewell has done before. I think even I will be impressed with my work. I have realized just how much greatness I can truly achieve when I put my mind to it. It is time to leave this tangent that I got into last quarter and back on track living like a true American. I, as always, thank you for your valuable time. I should be extremely grateful after what I have done if anyone ever gives me the time of day. I'm glad I wrote this letter. I learn something new every time I think about it. See you at school, Dr. Dana J. Yule. Yeah. I mean, what a bunch of bullshit. That whole letter was just bullshit. And did you notice he never took responsibility for anything? There's always an excuse. Oh, well, I just tried so hard to be perfect, and my body just, has limitations that my mind doesn't. Oh my God. Fuck off, you little prick. I hate this kid so much. Obviously I had to do a lot of research in this case, and I was like, oh my God, I hate this little prick. He is a little cunt. That's what he is. Dana Ewell is a cunt. Now, Pryor did add one last thing to the detectives before they left. Quote, only that Dana appears very driven. He seems to need to be seen as flawless. When you couple those traits with an inflated opinion of himself and an apparent bent for manipulating others to his own benefit, well, in my view, Dana believes he's brighter than he actually is, and he feels it's fine to cheat, as long as you don't get caught. I can't speak for others. However, I think Dana's quite transparent. People aren't as stupid as he assumes them to be. A few days after this, Dana consented for detectives to search the beach house and the cabin for Dale's missing gun. Again, you gotta, check off all these boxes, right? Especially if you're gonna bring someone to court, right? Someone's gonna point that out. So you gotta check every box. And of course, right, they didn't find the gun at either of those locations. So Dana met Detective Souza and Ibarra at the beach house. And as they were looking through their home, Ibarra decided she kind of wanted to see what Dana's reaction would be. And so she commented oh, hey, did you take a key from the awning shed when we turned the house over to you? And she just kind of wanted to get his reaction. And Dana just sort of was just sort of well, I didn't see what the big fucking deal was, since you guys cut the locks and everything anyway, so what does it matter? Dana then quickly changed the subject and produced his father's briefcase. And he took a letter from it. Quote, look at this. It's supposedly a letter to Bob Purcell from my dad. Here, you can take this copy. No way my dad wrote this thing. I think Purcell faked it. The letter was dated April 12th, 1992. It was addressed to Bob, and it stated that he should not leave Western Piper. Quote, it's possible that a salary equal to my own current salary and a negotiated bonus structure based on profits could be worked out. So yeah, they took the letter and told Dana they would, look into it or whatever. And as they were leaving, they noticed Glee's Cadillac still in the driveway. I think Dana may have driven it there, but get this. Souza noticed that there was still fingerprint dust on the car. Dana hadn't washed it. Quote, he may not have anything to do with the homicide, but he's a creepy son of a bitch. And this was according to Souza. He was just, I feel like he was pretty convinced that Dana was, suspect number one, but he was just, not wanting to make that leap because, again, all the eyes on this case. This was a huge case, huge. I mean, that's why there's so much information on this case. That's why, I kept digging more information, even more information that the book didn't have. So, I mean, yeah, I get his caution, And on April 30th, Dana would temporarily withdraw from SCU. Now, later, I think a few days or a few weeks later, Souza tracked down a student who Dr. Pryor said was friendly with Dana and knew him quite well. Her name was Alicia Lindsay, remember? The author of that yearbook article. She told Souza all about her friend Dana and how he was so smart and had a 180 IQ. And Souza asked her, like, well, how do you know he has a 180 IQ? Quote, guess he told me. Gets good grades, though. Dresses expensive, Armani suits, got a new Benz. He's into the money thing. Made a few million already. And this, of course, piqued Sousa's interest. Because remember, guys, like, the detectives were not aware of these articles that we talked about in part 1. They were not yet aware of them. And so, like, this is, like, the first time they would be pointed in the direction of these articles, right? And so, like, this piqued Sousa's interest, and he was like, wait, like, he made these millions, like, on his own? Quote, oh yeah, it was in all the papers, how he sold airplanes and made a truckload of cash in the stock market. And as far as friends went, she told Sousa, quote, I wouldn't say it was a lot, but he had a girlfriend, Monica, and his buddy Joel. God knows what he and Joel had in common. Dana in his business suits and Joel in ripped up t-shirts. And she told Sousa Joel's full name, Joel Radisich. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I watched a few news reports and, like, yeah, there was some different pronunciations, but there was a documentary I watched that was produced in 2022, and the clips they showed said Radisich. So that's how I'll pronounce it. Again, fuck Joel, so who cares? And she added, quote, Joel got busted for breaking into the dorm. That was a real kick in the ass, excuse my French. Yeah, him and some other schmuck stole stuff out of one of the dorms. I'm telling you, Joel's a real piece of work. And yeah, this is the first time Joel's name would be brought up to police. Police also talked, because remember, they're trying to do background information on Dana. They talked to a childhood friend of Tiffany's. Her name was Shaylee Erickson. And, you know, she grew up with Tiffany. They were childhood best friends. And she explained that as caring and kind and empathetic that Tiffany was, Dana was like the total antithesis of that. Like she said that, you know, her and Tiffany would be playing Barbies in the room, and then Dana out of nowhere would just come in and like rip the heads off the Barbie dolls and like laugh and stuff. She said he was very arrogant, and he just got more arrogant the older he got. And that he was just kind of a loon and just sort of kind of like what we already said, not as bright as he thought. Like she told detectives that he wanted to be a millionaire by the time he was 14. So as they're learning more about Dana, right? It's very, very clear and obvious that, like, okay, he's clearly driven. He's obviously manipulative. And he obviously thinks very highly of himself. You know, he believed he was way more intelligent and conniving than he actually was, right? Detectives also learned through their digging that Dana loved to hire people to do his dirty work for him. And this dated all the way back to junior high. So yeah, the whole thing was just, Dana was just so clearly very suspicious, right? On the way back from the beach house, Sousa and Ibarra stopped by the gas station that Dana said that he stopped at when he was going to Monica's. And yeah, Sousa was just kind of like sitting there and like kind of just like, dude, like, was Dana here? Did he watch his mother and sister drive by and then give the signal to the hitman that, you know, the family was on the way home? Like it was very disconcerting. But Sousa felt if they could find the trigger man, they could solve this. They'd get Dana. Cause like, I think at this point, Sousa was all but pretty much like sure that Dana was a suspect and had his family killed. Meanwhile, right? So the days and the weeks go by. Dana lives his life and assumes his father's life and business. Quote, he came in the first few months and acted like he owned the place, but that didn't sit well with the employees. He didn't have the experience to own it, and this was according to Bob. He and other employees at Western Piper said that Dana mainly spent his time in his father's office, closed with, the shades drawn and all that, making and receiving lots and lots of phone calls. So if you remember, Michael D. Dowling, he was the attorney kind of responsible for handling the estate, the inheritance, like all that stuff. But apparently, Dowling did not allow Dana to take over Western Piper as Dana wanted. Because, like I said, Dowling had, like, you know, the fiduciary responsibility to, like, look out for the estate's interests and all that stuff. And so he told Dana, like, no, yeah, you can't, like, come down as CEO and stuff like that. But he did make Dana vice president and gave him a $2,000 a month salary. And this was beginning in, like, May or June. So, right, as days and weeks continue, investigations continuing, this case is like the talk of Fresno, all right? Like, it's like the case. Like, if you lived in Fresno and you weren't talking about the Ewell murder case, people were wondering where the hell you've been, right? It was like the talk of the town. And so with that, you can guess what comes along with that, right? Rumors, false leads, crank calls, psychics, the weirdos who want to insert themselves into the investigation for some reason, right? Like, you had all of that to contend with. And yeah, you can imagine, right? This hinders investigations because they have to check every single lead they get, right? You have to, because what if you actually get an actual lead, right? So it was extremely hard for the Fresno police to really sift through all the bullshit. The worst thing that really compounded these rumors was the fact that Glee had worked for the CIA. That leaked to the public. So, of course, like, what do you think, guys? What do you think? Wow, someone who worked for the CIA is, like, murdered in their home with their family. Like, what do you think the kind of, like, rumors and conspiracy theories and stuff went around were, right? But there's one call that Sousa received that, like, I just wanted to read it to you guys because I just thought it was, like, super, super funny. Again, not that I don't believe that this stuff happens. I absolutely do. But it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Just thought it was amusing. And I wanted to share it with you. So, Sousa got this call from, like, some random reporter in Las Vegas, Nevada. And, like, the shit this reporter was, like, trying to connect this case with was just, again, it was amusing. So I wanted to share it with you. So this reporter, right, says, quote, I've been tracking a money laundering operation involving President Marcos, the then Philippine president. I have evidence that the feds, who, you understand, were this guy's buddy until he got tossed out, set up a money laundering deal over here for him. All kinds of nasty shit. You know if this Mrs. Ewell used to be with the CIA? You got it. And Dale Ewell's brothers are in a development deal in Fresno. Brighton Crest. A Chinese Tong family gets the cash from Marcos, brings it over there through Tong connections. They invest it in gold and real estate. Of course, the real estate is bought through frontmen, like the mob used to do here in Vegas when they bought casinos. You got Mrs. Yule and her Langley connections, and Dale Ewell's brothers are in on the deal, see? The whole thing's got the tacit okay of the CIA and network of feds and shit. Yeah, isn't that wild? And so, like, right, like, she was listening to all this, and, like, he asked the guys, like, wait, okay, so, like, what does this have to do with, like, the Yule murders? Quote, well, probably just peripheral, but what if they wanted to send a message to the brothers? And Sousa was like, well, I mean, that's pretty far-fetched. Quote, well, maybe, but I thought you should know about this Marcos Fed connection. When a family's practically wiped out, I thought you should know about these things, that's all. Hey, what if these guys meant to kill one of the brothers' families but got the wrong address? And at that point, like, Sousa just hung up on him and was like, all right, bro, like, no, that's not what this is pointing to. And again, like, I not that I don't believe this stuff happens, it absolutely does, right? Absolutely. But in this situation, yeah, I don't think it was the right way of thinking, you know? But I guess even after Sousa hung up on him, the reporter faxed over, like, a whole list of, like, judges and feds who were, like, supposedly, like, caught up in this deal and stuff, which, yeah, again, that just, like, amused me, so I wanted to share it with you. Now, approximately 2 weeks after the murders, the police had to come out publicly and admit, like, they had no suspects and they had no leads. And they had to admit that they were kind of still in the preliminary stages, right? They were still interviewing family, friends, colleagues, associates, all that, right? Sergeant Margaret Mims was a Fresno County Sheriff's Office Department spokeswoman, and she told the press, quote, we're talking to everybody within the sphere of influence, and in this particular case, that sphere of influence is very large, so it's going to take a while. Meanwhile, on May 3rd, Sousa got a call from Sean Shelby. Remember we talked about Sean in part 1? He was Dana's childhood bud. Well, he called up Sousa and wanted to let him know how Dana was acting and what he was saying. Quote, I just felt you should know he acted very strange. He told me the cops bugged his house. It was as if he were bragging or something. Said he couldn't talk inside his place. We met for lunch and he goes on with this bizarre lecture saying I should leave a paper trail to prove where I was, in case anything like this ever happens to me. When we left the restaurant, he started to touch me, pat me down. When I asked him what he was doing, he said he was checking to see if I wore a wire. He's really into this whole bad boy routine. Sean then informed Sousa about some of the crazy stuff him and Dana pulled when they were kids. Quote, oh, one time we TP'd this house, but Dana went and damaged the people's car and stuff. And that house was actually the house of Elizabeth Gulkasan. If you'll remember, she went to, like, grade school and junior high with Dana and then ran into him at SCU. We talked about her, like, very momentarily, I believe, in part 1. Yeah, it was her house that they TP'd. I can't remember if we revealed that or not in part 1, but yeah. And Sean said that when they ran out of toilet paper, Dana disappeared for, like, a little bit, like a few minutes. And when he returned, not only did he have more toilet paper, but he also had a bottle of vodka, a tomato, and some eggs with him. Sean said that Dana then proceeded to smear the food inside the family's car. And Sean said that, like, he just TP'd the house. Like, he continued TPing the house as Dana did that. Now, apparently, Elizabeth's parents somehow found out that it was Dana and Sean who did this. I'm not sure how they found out, but when they were, cornered and asked about it, Sean just admitted outright, like, yeah, I did it, my bad. However, Dana categorically denied everything. Denied, and his idiot parents believed their precious baby boy. Elizabeth would later say that this incident right here, and, like, Dana's reaction, the Yul's reaction, this whole thing just, ended her friendship with Dana. Quote, his parents stuck up for him. It was very sad to see his values were so warped that he couldn't admit it when something went wrong. It was just a prank, but ever since then, I lost respect for him. And she, added on about, what we've gone to at length at this point, Dana's obsession with wealth and money. Quote, I have never known anyone close to Dana where money is the single most determining factor of one's values. So Sean talked to Sousa some more, explaining, what he knew about Dana and all that. And, just told him, things such as, even though he himself had never witnessed it, Dana said that he, did cocaine, stuff like that, stuff that he knew, stuff from their childhood, whatnot. Sean also said that Dana was he was always a plotter. He was always, trying to come up with some get rich quick scheme. He was just always that kind of, shady kind of guy, And Sean told Sousa that, after he learned, the details of how the bodies were discovered, that Dana was with an FBI agent and, no signs of forced entry and that kind of stuff. Sean told Sousa, oh man, that is totally within Dana's wheelhouse. I could totally see him doing that. Quote, so you don't get to see his initial reaction. So I could see Dana giving someone a copy of a key to his house, they get in, and then his parents come home. And Sousa asked, well, do you think Dana would use someone from school to do his dirty work? Sean, said enthusiastically, quote, sure, he could just say, look, my parents are loaded, just dust them and wait for the inheritance. Oh, and Dana had a few things to say about you and your partner. Burke, that's it. Dana says that both of you are too dumb to solve anything. Said Burke couldn't find a gun in a gun store. Listen, I have to run, but you might be interested in a story about Dana that went around school for a while. Dana was on the lawn with friends, discussing, how they might get rich. Everybody was offering up boneheaded ideas and all, but Dana finally says, I know the fastest way to get rich. Kill your parents. Yeah. All of this, right, is compounding in that, it's pretty obvious that Dana is super, super sus, right? However, before they could actually, officially go after Dana, they had to eliminate all these other suspects, right? They still had to rule out Bob as a suspect, because remember, he wanted to buy a Western Piper, but apparently Dale didn't want to sell or whatever. So, they had to, at least eliminate him as a suspect before they could really set their sights on Dana. However, Bob's alibi was rock solid. So there was no way he was involved. Although Sousa did believe that Bob did pen that fake letter that Dana had produced. They did think that Bob had faked that. And with that continuing train of thought, right, eliminating all the other possibilities before they can really laser focus on Dana. Because, right, the superiors are going to be yo, what the fuck, man? This rich family, you want to go after this kid? They're going to have to show some proof that, hey, we've eliminated every other possibility, right? So the next thing they had to eliminate was that whole Aerostar billing dispute. So on May 7th, detectives Burke and Sousa drove down to Southern California, specifically to Santa Ana, and they were going to interview the Aerostar owners, right? They met with one of the owners. It was an attorney named Ronald Laws, and he co-owned the Aerostar with law partner James Guildwell. And it was actually Ronald who had taken the plane back. Ronald explained the situation, saying that their business manager, Wayne Wendell, had been flying the Aerostar when one of the engines malfunctioned, and so he touched down at Western Piper. And according to Ronald, Western Piper stored the plane, but Ronald and James felt that they had been gouged on the billing, and so they were disputing it. That was the whole dispute. Ronald said that he had actually begun court proceedings on April 20th, but on April 22nd, when he landed in Fresno and looked over and saw his plane, he was well, I'm just gonna take this opportunity to take my plane back. And that's what he did. Quote, and in case you're interested, I spent Easter with my parents in Palm Desert. And with that, right, they were able to officially check off this whole Aerostar dispute as a motive for the murders. They're there's no way, these two professional, high-banking, attorneys are gonna take someone out and their family for, a $1,700 repair bill, right? That's just Not gonna happen. So on their way out of town, Sousa decided to call up Judy Radisich, Joel's mother. He had found her number listed. Judy lived in West Hills, which was not far from where they were at. Joel's younger brother, Daniel, answered the phone, and he handed the phone over to Joel, who demanded to know why Sousa was calling him. Oh, and by the way, after doing like a little bit further digging, I believe Joel's younger twin sisters also lived at the home at this time. When Joel got on the phone, Sousa explained, who he was, that he was investigating, the Yule homicide, and he asked Joel to confirm that Dana was a close friend. Quote, well, just casual friends. I don't know Dana that well, and I don't know what happened to his family. And, Sousa was like, well, we'd still like to interview you. But Joel was just very hesitant, saying, like, he didn't know anything about anything. And when Sousa said, well, we'd like to, meet you, maybe, like, tomorrow, if possible, like, Joel quickly said, quote, not at my mother's. Anyway, I don't know anything. But, like, Sousa kept pressing. I was like, well, we really need to talk to you, And, like, Joel finally, I guess with his voice, like, pretty high, was like, quote, why? Are you going to arrest me? Bro, learn a poker face. And Sousa assured him, like, no, man, like, we're just doing a standard background check, and we need to talk to anybody who knew Dana. And Joel was insistent that the detectives not come by to rattle his mother, and he agreed to meet them at their hotel at the Holiday Inn the next day for an interview. So at noon the next day, Joel showed up, and as they were riding the elevator up, Joel said, quote, I can't believe I asked if you were going to arrest me. I just get nervous. I kind of got into trouble once at college. Me and a buddy borrowed some furniture from the dorm lounge. Just a prank, but everyone got bent out of shape. We were arrested. I thought maybe you were the Santa Clara campus police tricking me or something. He stated that Dana had no part in the prank. Now, it was very obvious that, like, Joel was very tense and nervous. Again, like, not a very good poker face. And so they started the interview by, asking Joel, well, like, how long had you known Dana? Quote, okay, let me see. I guess I have something I can write down here. And he produced a pen and wrote on the hotel notepad. I'm trying to think. It wasn't a year ago. Okay, 1992, 91. I have to think about this. I graduated last year, so it'd be fall. I was in the Casa dorm. Yeah, 90, I met him. Right, but I got kicked out in January. We were friends. I mean, not real tight, but we liked to kick it together. Other than school, we weren't communicating. Now, as Joel talked more, he seemed to relax a bit more, He stated the last time he had gone to the Yule house in Fresno had been in the spring of 1991, and he claimed that that was the only time he had gone there. When asked if he had met the Yules when he went there, he said, quote, we said hi, then we had to go. We dumped off his car, went inside. I said hi to the mom, and I don't know if his dad was there. Don't remember. Yeah, he was there. They asked Joel if he had met or seen the Yules before this, and Joel stopped and thought about it and said, quote, yes, I did. We went to the beach house. I can't remember if it was before. I spent a weekend with them. I believe it was before. And, guys, get this. They asked him if Dana liked to throw money around. This was Joel's answer. Quote, oh no, very conservative, extremely conservative, very. They asked Joel if Dana had ever talked about his family. Quote, he liked his family far as I could tell, but I wasn't that nosy. He said that Dana never talked about any family problems or anything like that. And he said the last time he had spoke to Dana had been that previous fall. He said that he had only been to Fresno that one time when he went to the Yule home. And if he was given the Yule home address, he could probably find it. But he didn't know where the house was by heart. He said he did see the articles about Dana while they were in school. Quote, I thought the article was pretty neat. He said he knew it wasn't true, though. Quote, look, I wasn't going to, if you're a friend, I'm not going to, and he sort of trailed off, and that's when Burke cut in. That's a big deal to talk to a reporter like that and have the majority of it be such a bunch of baloney. But Joel just responded with, quote, so ask me a question. And Burke said, yeah, here's the question. I want to know what type of, character Dana has. Why would he lie about all these articles and stuff? Was it to, satiate his ego or what? And Joel just said, quote, no, it was more of a political maneuver to open doors and stuff. And they asked him, well, how on earth are you going to open doors when, you guys are still in college? And Joel responded with, quote, if you can prove you're something, it may be a little BS, but if I'm going to you for a job, say a sales manager job, when I bring this PR stuff, it's more of a PR thing. I read the article and thought it was funny. He also confirmed that Dana had been a fan of the Billionaire Boys Club. Quote, I think more to be well off. It was just succeed in Dana's world, not a question of mega power. They asked Joel where he had been that Easter Sunday, and he said he had been at a 24/7 auto body shop called Hamrick's. Said he was there from about 11 a.m. or noon and left at about 11 that night. Joel told the detectives that he didn't really get along with his father, remember, Dr. Nick Radisich, and whenever he was in town, he would usually not go home. And with this ended Joel's interview. And Burke and Sousa were talking, as he was leaving and peeling out in his Honda. Sousa and Burke are talking about what, they thought. And they were just wondering if, his cool demeanor, because, again, Joel was very nervous at first, but he very quickly sort of relaxed, and he gave pretty good answers, and he seemed to give them in a very, convincing way. And they were wondering if this was all part of, like a facade that he was showing them. And so, because Joel, there was something with him, they decided to do some surface level background check on Joel as well. By the way, my yard guy is here, so I am sorry if you hear buzzing in the background. I'll do what I can in post, but this is the only time I can film, and you know how it is. You do what you gotta do. Anyway, getting back to it. So they did just a little surface background check on Joel. Now, we already went over some of this in part 1, but there was a little bit more information that I was able to find out. So like we mentioned in part 1, right, his parents were Judith Judy Radisich and Dr. Nick Radisich. So if you remember, Judy was a piano teacher, while Nick had a PhD in aerospace engineering and worked in the aerospace industry. And if you will also remember that eventually Nick would end up primarily working out of and living in Atlanta, Georgia, only coming home occasionally. Oh, and when I was editing part 1, I totally forgot to give you Joel's birthday. It is August 16th, 1970. So if you remember, in part 1, we briefly went into Joel's background and that there were 7 Radisich children. Well, I was able to find out who they all were. So the oldest of the Radisich children was Nick Jr., and he was a captain in the Air Force. And then there was Peter. I think he may have been the second oldest because he was older than Joel. And, we mentioned this also in part 1. He was a plumber at Sketchley Mason. Then there was Joel. There was a younger sister named Anne, a younger brother named Daniel, and the twin sisters. And they were named Susan and Sarah, and I believe they were the youngest of the Radisich children. So anyway, Nick Jr. would end up describing the upbringing that the Radisich children endured. He said it was a very strict household and highly structured. He explained that the most important things to his parents were, quote, an education, a good work ethic, religion, family, saying chores and mandatory work projects took up all of their free time. He described his brother Joel as a smart and fast kid, but that in their father's eyes, Joel couldn't do anything right. He was just an abysmal failure in their father's eyes and a total constant fuck up. So Nick said that Joel eventually learned to cope with their father's incessant berating, criticism, and whatnot. I don't think their father ever physically abused them, but he certainly verbally and emotionally abused them. Always criticized Joel. Nothing he said, nothing he said could be right. Nothing he did could be right. And Nick said that Joel learned to cope with this abuse by just closing himself off. So while their father was going on a tangent saying just what a fuck up he was or this, that, and the other, Nick said that Joel just shut down, wouldn't say a word at all. He would just sit there as his father continued to berate him and go off on him and just sit there and not say a word until their father had run out of steam, as it were. Judy said that Joel was a distant child, and she did state that on one point in time, she did wonder if he didn't have autism or some sort of maybe personality disorder, neurological disorder, or something. She did say that her and Nick Sr. worried about their son's mental state. Maybe don't abuse him then. And Nick Sr., Dr. Dickhead, described his son as, quote, sick. Now, over time, I guess the Radisich's marriage began to crack and crumble, and Dr. Dickhead decided to cope with that by spending less and less time at home with his kids and just diving into work. Yeah. Yeah, real nice, right? Real family values there. And eventually, right, as we went over, he would eventually relocate and primarily live and work in Atlanta, Georgia, coming home on occasion, holidays or something. And yeah, if you'll remember, Joel would take off when his father would come home, and if he couldn't sleep at a friend's house or crash somewhere, he would just sleep in his car. Judy and Nick Sr. would finally divorce in 1991. Now, we already went over a little bit about Joel's childhood, primarily his behavior and stuff. stuff, right, in part 1. At least we got into, like, right, his behavior, his demeanor, kind of what his peers thought of him. But let's get into some teachers and authority figures and what they thought about Joel. And not just Joel, but the entire Radisich family, specifically Dr. Dickhead. Now, Joel was described as a primarily bright, but very socially awkward child. Joel's middle school art teacher, Deborah Frederick, said that he was a very gifted, but disturbed artist. Quote, "They portrayed a lot of blood and weapons, mutilation and gore. I've never seen anything so graphic in all the years I've taught." Priest John Murray and Chris Poney, along with nun Mary Malone, also spoke about, Joel's childhood and spoke about the Radisich's family's, sort of connection to the local Catholic community and the Catholic Church and schools. If you'll remember in part 1, the school that Joel and all of his siblings went to was an elite private Catholic school. So all 3 of them would speak about an incident where Dr. Dickhead, Nick Sr., became abusive over this policy that the church wanted to enact, right? Get this. So scandalous. So I guess the church wanted to attempt to consolidate the first communion classes of the Catholic private school with the Catholic public school. So the private school children and the public school children would be in the same communion class. The horror! And Dr. Dickhead was livid that they would do this. Quote, "He yelled at me and put me down as a woman. He said, 'What kind of nun are you? What kind of woman are you?'" This was obviously according to Mary. Sister Mary? Sister Malone? Whatever. It was obviously according to her. And I guess Nick Sr. had such a prevalent reputation for being such a dickhead and a douche nozzle that at the church one time, or church or school, I can't remember, at one time when they suspected Joel of theft, they did not inform his parents. Quote, "I wanted to protect Joel from that man." So that was sort of some cursory background info, right, that police discovered on Joel. And so let's now get back to the investigation, right? So as they also were looking into Joel, they were continuing to look into Dana. So to that end, Burke ended up phoning up an old high school classmate of Dana's, and she said the same that, everyone else had, that Dana was obsessed with money and wealth and prestige. Quote, "Every Friday afternoon, Dana had a limo pick him up after school." She also named another former classmate named Michael Poindexter, who was also close with Dana. Although at that moment, he was currently going to school in Salt Lake City, Utah. And yeah, if you remember, we mentioned Michael briefly. He got a tour of the Yule home shortly after Dana had moved in. And on Friday, May 15th, relatives of the Yules announced a $25,000 reward for any information, that led to a resolution in the case. And it was announced through the law firm Dowling, Megarian, Phillips, and Aaron Incorporated, which, we mentioned this earlier, right? They are handling the Yule estate. Specifically, Dowling was in charge of the Yule estate. And the family statement about, the reward read in part, quote, "Dana Yule and the entire Yule family are grief-stricken and are fully cooperating with the Sheriff's Department to help solve this crime. The Yule family is supportive of the Sheriff's Department's efforts to solve these murders and encourages anyone with information to come forward to the Fresno County Sheriff's Department if they have pertinent information concerning this heinous crime." And later that same month, Dale's brothers would contribute an additional $25,000 to the reward. In the statement, in the article that was written about this announcement, Dowling said that the family would not comment directly on the case. Quote, "The Sheriff's Department is working very hard on it. We're pleased with what they're doing, but of course the family is very concerned that is not being solved. If the Sheriff's Department has any leads, they are keeping them very quiet." And that right there, boys and girls, was the problem. So as they're eliminating, right, lead after lead, suspect after suspect, they were drying up. As we've already went over, right, they've eliminated Jack, Bob, Frank Lamb. They found it really preposterous that, Frank would wait, 20 years to enact revenge on Dale. Plus, it didn't make sense to kill Glee and Tiffany. There was a dirty cop who was, I guess, Frank's hired muscle back in the day, and his name was George Crotter. And Sousa actually worked with him for a while, and so when Sousa spoke to him, he believed Crotter when he was like, "Yeah, dude, this is not Frank's style at all." Not only did Frank not really have a penchant for murder, despite his supposed mob ties, but there was literally nothing beneficial in it for Frank or his hired muscle to off Dale and his family, you know. And additionally, the two of them had pretty airtight alibis for that Easter Sunday. I swear, like I always say, it is not a day without animal hair in my makeup and everywhere. Meanwhile, as we've discussed, as investigators are working the case and all that, Dana is just living the high life. He assumed his father's business, drove around in his father's car, and Joel even moved in with Dana for a brief period. On May 18th, Dale's brothers, so if you remember, we have Richard, Ben, and Dan. They met with Sousa, right, on this date, May 18th. And they didn't want to meet with Sousa and discuss what was on their mind, but they knew they had to. Quote, "We're very concerned, and of course we're torn. We don't want to implicate Dana without cause. We've all had enough hurt, and if Dana had nothing to do with this, God help him and us coming here." And this was according to Dan. He had actually been the one to phone up Sousa the day before and requested this meeting. And it was because the brothers had all come to a consensus that their nephew, quote, had not shown any signs of grief over his family's death, that in fact it appeared he was enjoying himself. And Dan continued telling Sousa, like, why they thought about this, what their thought process was, and all that. Quote, "At first, we just thought Dana was in shock. You know, closed down. We figured he'd just come apart one of these days. You were at the service. He was unaffected until he saw a diamond ring. And the next day, he and his buddies went out boating. Everything revolves around money with this kid. He pestered the hell out of Ben here. He's an attorney, you know. He pestered Ben to read the will. My God, the kid could have at least shown a degree of subtlety. He threw a fit when he found out he wouldn't get all of it right away. He said, 'How could Dad do this to me?' Just like that. As if Dale got himself shot to death just to spite Dana. Then we got into it with him about cremation. He wanted his whole family cremated. Save money. We told him we couldn't stop him from doing that to Glee and Tiffany, but we sure as hell could stop it when it came to our own brother. As if that wasn't enough, when the funeral director showed him the caskets, Dana pointed to a cheap model and says, 'That's good enough for Tiffany.'" It's just, dude, this fucking kid, like, he is such a little cunt. Like, the audacity of this bitch. Like, okay, here's the thing. Here's what I'm thinking, right? As I'm, like, reading through this, I'm like, okay, if you're gonna go through all this effort, right, to, like, kill your family and, you know, do all this nonsense and whatnot, you would think he would look up, like, acting classes and how to, you know, show emotion like a normal human being, you know? But again, right, Dr. Pryor said it earlier, Dana's not nearly as bright as he thinks he is. So I guess what had happened, right, that, you know, this incident that Dan just described, what happened was the day after this discovery of the bodies, so on Wednesday, Dana and all of Dale's brothers met up at Dan's house. And it was so they could meet up and speak with a representative from the funeral home. And apparently a very heated argument began when they were talking about, the disposal of the remains. And that's when the representative asked, like, well, was there any type of will that expressed the family's wishes on how they would like to be, you know, disposed of? So no one really knew, but Ben, who remember, was an attorney, said that several years prior, Glee had come to him asking for a recommendation. And she wanted him to recommend someone to arrange her will for him, and he had recommended Michael D. Dowling. So Ben called up Dowling the next day after this family meeting, on Thursday, after the bodies were discovered. And Dowling did manage to find the Yule's wills after he had heard of the news and whatnot, so he got to digging and did find the wills. And so Ben was able to pick them up that day, and that evening, everyone met back up at Dan's house, only this time Dana was accompanied by Agent Zent. And if you will remember, Agent Zent is the FBI agent father of Dana's girlfriend, Monica Zent. So they all had dinner, and after dinner, Dana and his uncles excused themselves to a room. Ben said, quote, "John Zent started into the room, and Dana said, 'No, I think you should stay outside.'" Yeah. Why would you think that you would go in there? Like, that was just so weird to me that he would think it was appropriate for him to go in there. So once in the room, Ben said that he announced that they had found the wills, but there were no burial instructions in the wills. Quote, then Dana said, "Well, what about the money?" And Ben told him, quote, "Basically, you get half when you're 30, half when you're 35. He seemed startled. He sort of lurched forward, brought his fist down, and said, "Why did my father do that?" Yeah, so this was just one of many, many incidents that had caused the brothers to start suspecting their own nephew of murdering their brother. And his family. Now, Richard added on, because it was very clear and obvious that none of them wanted to be there, but Richard, clearly didn't want to be there. But, he knew that this is something they had to be discussed. And he said, quote, "Look, detective, we can't be certain Dana was involved, but his actions tell us that he didn't care much about his own family. For me, the straw came when the mortician told Dana he could have a little flower pot placed on Dale's headstone at a cost of $35. He said, I'm not spending $35 on that. I won't be seeing it anyway." And it was after Richard said this that Ben said, quote, "$35. Wouldn't spend $35 on his own daddy." And they also added that Dana had to be forced to go to his family's memorial service. And by the way, Dana did end up cremating Glee and Tiffany, and Dale's brothers were able to get him buried, and Tiffany's ashes were then placed in a box and placed on Dale's casket. But get this. Dana picked up Glee's ashes, and nobody knows what he did with them. And to this day, nobody knows, and they've never been found. And, I'm super curious. Do you think Dana went and, disposed of them somewhere that he thinks his mom would like? Because remember, we were going into his childhood, and his dad was a misogynist and thought Dana needed to, pull himself up by the bootstraps, unlike his sister, who was, a woman. Until, Dale rode his son pretty hard, and Glee, kind of coddled him to kind of make up for that. So, I wonder, as much as someone like Dana can, did he care for his mother on some level and, went and disposed of her remains somewhere that she would want? Because, why just pick up Glee's? I don't know. I'm super curious to know what you guys think. What do you guys think? I guess all the investigators think that he just unceremoniously dumped her somewhere. But yeah, why not just leave her remains there? Why grab his mother's? I don't know. That was just very odd to me. It stuck with me. Now, this meeting with Dale's brothers pretty much solidified it that Dana was their number one suspect. And they believed that Dana had his family killed for the inheritance. Although Sousa also, was kind of thinking to himself, well, I can't eliminate Dale's brothers because, they stand to inherit it if Dana is disinherited, right? But the fact that Dale's brothers had been in constant communication with the police department, Sousa, wanting to know updates, trying to offer information, calling police back when they called them, and the fact that Dana never did any of this, right? It was all very, suspect. Yeah, Dana is definitely our number one suspect. Because, yeah, guys, not once did Dana call and ask about, the progress of the investigation or anything. And so it was after this meeting with Dale's brothers that Sousa decided to go to his bosses and see if they couldn't get members of the narcotics enforcement team, known as NET, to do some surveillance on Dana. These were highly trained and skilled operatives. That was their whole jam, was doing undercover surveillance and stuff. And Lieutenant Richard White agreed. So as all of that was getting set up, Burke and Sousa flew to Salt Lake City, Utah to interview Michael Poindexter. Michael told them, all about the greed, the billionaire boys club, how much Dana had idolized the convicted killer, Joe Hunt. He also stated that what had attracted them to Joe Hunt was his paradox philosophy. So basically, this philosophy states that by changing perspectives, black could be seen as white, and any action could be justified. Good and evil were interchangeable, according to this philosophy. Is it really a wonder why Dana really, really admired this philosophy? And, Burke actually voiced this, man, I can't believe you guys would, idolize these ruthless criminals and killers and whatnot, But Michael was just very unapologetic, even angry and defensive, and finally told the cops, you know what? If Dana told me that he killed his family, I don't even know if I'd go to the police. Yeah, real lovely. So as all of that was going on, right, as everything that we had just discussed was going on, if you remember, Bedreau was still trying to figure out their murder weapon used, right? So I guess he had sort of sent out an SOS, requested help from other experts in the field. And it wasn't until Carlos Rosati, who was with the ATF Special Testing Laboratory in Maryland, called Bedreau up that he would get his first break. So Rosati asked if all the bullets were exactly the same, even the markings, and Bedreau confirmed yes. And that's when Rosati suggested that Bedreau start experimenting with silencers. But get this, apparently Bedreau would still have to get some sort of special permit from the ATF to build a silencer because building silencers are illegal, even for law enforcement. So yeah, that was the first break that Boudreaux got, as Sousa and Burke and Ibarra and all of them were kind of like doing some background digging and whatnot, right? Meanwhile, back in Fresno, right, the rumor mill was still going at it, still going strong. I guess the most prominent rumor and theory was that Dale was somehow tied to Frank's drug smuggling operation, and it had, I don't know, something to do with the mob or something. Like, that was the prevalent rumor. And like, the rumors got so bad, it got to the point where the police had to like publicly put out a statement saying like, stop with all this, Sheriff McGarrion had to come out and like publicly deny like all the rumors, telling them like, guys, this isn't helping. This is like hindering the investigation. Like, these rumors have got to stop. And Detective Sousa said, quote, "We've pretty much ruled out any fallout from the old land ring. And as far as we can tell, Yule's fortune came from hard work and shrewd business investments in farming. He didn't need drug smuggling." There was also rumors that there was bad blood between the Filipino investors and Dale, and I can't remember which brother was running that, but they thought maybe there was like some fallout there. But, Sousa pointed out that was also ruled out. Quote, "If something did go sour between the Filipinos and the Yules, why kill Gilly and Tiffany? It doesn't add up." So yeah, that's how bad the rumors got, And finally, on June 25th, Net started their surveillance on Dana. So on that day, they observed Dana leaving his home in his Mercedes, and he was accompanied by Joel. Even though at that point in time, they did not know it was Joel, because they didn't know who Joel was. Now, they noted that on the way to United Security Bank, Dana drove in a, quote, counter-surveillance type of way. And basically, he would, like, go in random directions, make random U-turns, pull into driveways and back out, and basically sort of taking, like, a long, convoluted, no-sense route to the bank. At about 12:20 p.m., Deputy Alan DeCamp, he was one of the members of NET surveilling Joel and Dana, and he saw those two enter the bank. Quote, "They parked and walked inside. They came out a short time later, Mr. Ewell carrying a briefcase. He put it in the back seat of the Mercedes and they drove off." At about 12:30, Dana and Joel left the bank's parking lot and drove to like an empty real estate lot that had a for sale sign on it. Again, driving to this lot in a counter-surveillance type of way. At 1 p.m., the team saw the two of them look at helicopters at corporate air. Dana then returned back home at 3:45. The next day, on June 26th, the team observed Joel's black Honda CRX leaving the Yule's garage, and this was about 11:15. However, the team would soon lose Joel. As we will get into, Joel drove like an asshole, like running red lights, ran stop signs and whatnot, so like it was very easy to lose him in traffic. At about 1:20 p.m., Joel returned to the Yule home in his Honda as Dana drove up in his Mercedes. The two then got into Glee's Cadillac and drove to the fig and pistachio farms that Dana had inherited. They then arrived at a lawyer's office about 2:45. At 3:41 p.m., Dana and Joel then went to Union Bank. However, only Dana went in. Joel stayed in the car, and only 3 minutes later, at 3:44 p.m., Dana ran to the car, like jumping, and he's all happy and excited, like waving a check around. And the team noted that he looked ecstatic. The next day, June 27th, the team followed Dana and Joel as they hopped in the family's Wagoneer and drove to corporate air. The two then departed for the Yule's cabin at Shaver Lake. And of course, the team, always following them, right? The next day, the only thing the team observed was that Joel and Dana's cars were parked in the garage. They couldn't see them, but Tiffany's car had been parked in front of the cabin. The next day, June 29th, at 1:30 p.m., the team was notified that Dana was now at Home Federal Bank, and he was at the branch located in East Kings Canyon. 10 minutes later, Dana was at the Bank of America branch located there. He then returned to Home Federal Bank, and then went to a Bank of the West branch, an Investigators Thrift branch, and finally, at around 4 p.m., Dana went into Western Financial Savings. And so as Sousa's reading this report, reading the notes, and one thing that obviously, right, is sticking out is like, wow, Dana sure is hitting up a lot of different banks. And of course, right, also noted that, he was super, stoked and overjoyed, with that check. But what Sousa really, really noted was that Joel was with Dana all 5 days that Net had surveilled them. And this, remember, Joel told Burke and Sousa that he hadn't seen Dana since he had graduated college. And I was a little unclear on how Sousa knew it was Joel with Dana? I'm gonna guess based on the descriptions, because I'm sure they had, like, physical descriptions of the man with Dana, and I'm guessing that's how Sousa put it together, that it was Joel. Another thing that detectives were really kind of, like, kicking themselves in the balls for was, like, they had completely neglected to confirm Joel's alibi. Like, with just everything, like, going on and stuff, and, like, them being led in different directions, it just kind of slipped through the cracks. And it especially got dropped after they called Hamrick's auto body shop. They called there several times, and the owner/manager, Nick Johns, was always out. And he was also the one that Joel said he had talked to and been there, you know? So they really needed to talk to this Nick Johns guy. But yeah, he was always, like, not on site whenever they called. And so that was another thing that helped it kind of slip through the cracks. And so on July 1st, Burke and Sousa decided to drive down to Hamrick's. And they were able to interview Nick Johns, and he completely shredded Joel's alibi. So Nick said Joel had called him that Easter Sunday. Quote, "Oh yeah, not exactly sure, but it wasn't long ago that he called me. A week? Anyway, he tells me that I should remember that he was around on Sunday." And they, of course, asked Nick, well, was he? Quote, "No, I didn't see him here. He said I saw him here, but I don't think so. He says, gee, Nick, you remember talking to me, right? All you need to do is tell the cops what you saw." Yeah, Joel was trying to gaslight this motherfucker into alibying him. And that's what Nick thought, too, is like, this bitch is trying to gaslight me. I know I did not speak to you. They then asked Nick, hey, do you know where Joel is right now? And he's like, nah, but his brother Peter works at Sketchley Mason Plumbing next door. Maybe he'll know. And so that was their next stop. So Peter said he didn't know where his little brother was at that very moment. He said that whenever he needed him, he would just page him. And so the detectives asked, like, well, would you mind paging him now? And Peter's like, well, let me finish my work, because he was, like, in the middle of working when they talked to him. He said he himself did not see Joel on Easter Sunday. He said that the Saturday before Easter, he and his wife, Danielle Bargerstock, they had gotten married in 1989, were at Knott's Berry Farm celebrating her 24th birthday with two other couples. And then that night, they stayed at the Marriott Hotel and then went home the next day on that Easter Sunday. And then after they returned home, they went to Danielle's mother's home, but they returned, like, early in the afternoon because Danielle and her mother had argued. He said that last he heard, Joel was staying with some friends in LA. And they also asked him when was the last time his brother had been in Fresno. Quote, I know I went a while ago to pick up a light for my grandparents' anniversary. That was a few months ago. He said that his brother was more into computers and boats than firearms. And then the detectives asked Peter if they thought Joel was capable of killing someone. Quote, Jesus, what a question. I don't think so. He talks mean at times, but listen, he's my brother, but I don't really know him all that well. And they then asked Peter for Joel's pager number. Quote, I'm not much for remembering numbers. I can spell it out for you, though. It's 818-KILLAJR. Yeah. Joel's pager number read Killa JR. What a moron. And though they, tried to page Joel numerous times, even had Peter try to contact him, leaving, all kinds of messages and whatnot, Joel never returned any of them. Peter would eventually call up the detectives and said that he did finally manage to get a hold of Joel, and he did tell him that it was urgent that he contact detectives. And by that time, when Peter had called, Burke and Sousa were on their way back to Fresno. And Sousa got 2 unknown calls on his cell phone, but every time he picked up, there was nobody there and they would just hang up. Now, towards the tail end of July, Sousa got a call from defense attorney Richard Berman. He informed Sousa that he was now Dana's attorney. And so any communication that Sousa or anyone wanted to have with Dana about the investigation or anything had to go through him first. And Sousa didn't like that. And the two kind of had a bickering argument over the phone. And Sousa was insisting he had a right to interview Dana whenever he want. And Berman saying no, actually you don't. Not when he's my client. And they were just going back and forth, back and forth. And finally, Sousa said, quote, Mr. Berman, this discussion isn't going anywhere. What do you legal types call it? A circular argument? I agree. We're wasting time here, detective. You've been informed of our position and a letter to that effect will follow in a few days. That is, once again, you're to refer all questions regarding the Yule case and Dana Yule to me in the future. So yeah, Dana's already gotten some legal representation. And all throughout the next month of August, Sousa and Burke went through all of the Yule financials. They would end up writing a total of 22 search warrants to get the financial records of Dale, Glee, Tiffany, and Dana. And along with all those records came the financial records of Glee's mother. Remember, Glee Mitchell? She was referred to as Big Glee. That's how I'm going to call her. They also got Big Glee's financial records because Glee had been the administrator and the executor of her mother's estate. So when the detectives pouring through these financial records, they find that Dana is now in charge of his grandmother, Big Glee's, estate. And it appeared he was using his grandmother's money to pay his monthly credit card bills. Isn't that lovely? But I guess what really, really piqued Sousa's interest was 2 checks that Dana had written. Or excuse me, they weren't checks, they were cash withdrawals that Dana had done. They were each for $5,660. So yeah, that was a little interesting tidbit that Sousa decided to file in the back of his mind for future reference. They then visited the Ewell's estate attorney, Dowling, and he listed off all the assets that made up the estate, and all in all, he was saying that the estate was valued at about $7 million. And then Dowling explained his role to the detectives, that he was to keep the business enterprises of Western Piper and the farms, functioning and running, liquidating assets, as he saw fit, consulting with the CPA on the estate's tax returns, and, quote, "Of course, I work with the heir as he receives his inheritance." And he confirmed for the detectives what Dale's brothers had said, that Dana did not get the whole $7 million at once. Quote, "Dana Yule, through an account set up in his name, as well as another in Tiffany's, will soon receive almost $500,000, but the bulk of the estate will be paid out in increments. At the age of 25, Dana will inherit the accumulated interest on the assets. At 30, he'll receive half the total assets. At 35, it's the whole shebang." So at the age of 25, Dana would inherit the accumulated interest of the estate, which was primarily from the fig and pistachio farms. And this averaged to about $300,000 to $400,000 a year. Yeah, can you imagine? Must be nice. At 30, Dana would get half the estate, and at 35, he'd get all of it. And so, yeah, as Dowling was explaining all this, the detectives were thinking, Dana freaking out about not getting everything at once, that makes a lot of sense now. This is starting to fit together, having his family off, thinking he'd get the whole estate, and boom, turns out, nah, you get it. You get it in piecemeal. Additionally, they discovered that Dana was the immediate beneficiary of almost $300,000 in, life insurance policies and trusts and all that. And this money was not subject to trust restrictions or probate court oversight or anything like that. He just got it. There were 2 $100,000 trust accounts that Dale had set up in his son's name, an $83,000 certificate of deposit in Dana's name, $119,000 worth of Tiffany's assets, a $25,000 trust that would be payable to Dana at 21 years old, individual retirement accounts for Dale and Glee that totaled about $7,500, and other life insurance payouts of about $1,000. And if that wasn't enough, in June, Dana had also been named the administrator of Tiffany's $310,000 estate. Yeah. So even if this little bitch doesn't get the whole $7 million at once, this little asshole is pretty set up, And remember, that stuff that I just listed off towards the end there was not subject to the probate restrictions, trust restrictions, or any of that. He just got that. Now, as Dowling was, discussing all this and, laying it all out for the detectives, he demanded to know, wait, is Dana officially a suspect in his family's murder? Because, right, obviously he'd be disqualified. He'd be disinherited. But Dowling was also saying, he had a fiduciary responsibility to look out for, the estate and the trust. And so, he wanted to know, if something was up. And, of course, right, detectives could just tell him, investigation is ongoing. Can't really tell you anything. And before they left, Dowling did note that he had felt sorry for Dana, so he had allowed Dana to use his office to make some phone calls, even giving Dana a key to his office. However, he racked up a huge phone bill and then, balked at the idea when Dowling said that he should pay it, saying that, he didn't even have any money yet. And besides, it was Joel who mainly made those calls. And of course, after this, right, detectives were more determined than ever to really track down Joel. And they would eventually get the phone records from Dowling's office, and a majority of those calls were, to either Joel's mother, Peter, or to friends that Joel had at SCU. So that's when they decided to drive back down to West Hills. So in 3-hour gridlock traffic, they drove down to West Hills, and they went to Judy Radichich's house. Judy answered, and she insisted she had no idea where her son was. And by the way she was acting and saying whatever, it was so clear that she was hiding something. Again, not a lot of good poker players in this case. They asked to come in, and for some inexplicable reason, Judy allowed them. Peeps, just FYI, you do not have to let a cop into your home without a warrant. Why? No, never. I would never allow a cop to step inside my house. But anyway, They went into the house. Sousa kept trying to say that they really needed to find Joel. It was very, very important that he may even be in danger and that, like, it would really be better if they found Joel before someone else did, right? Like, clearly trying to, like, you know, freak her out because, like, she already looked frazzled and stressed and nervous, and it was obvious she knew something. So, yeah, Sousa was trying to really, really, like, hit on that. And then he also kind of, because she kept repeating, right? Like, I don't know where he is. I don't know where he's staying. Haven't talked to him, yada, yada, yada. And so Sousa, like, picked up on that and was like, well, if you don't know where he is and you don't know how to contact him, maybe you should file a missing persons report. And, like, she immediately shot down that idea. I was like, no, that's ridiculous. And Sousa thought that that meant she did know where her son was at that moment. Like, she knew where he was staying. Sousa then said, quote, do you know where we can get Joel's dental charts in case someone turns up? And Judy did not take kindly to this at all, and she shouted, quote, that's not fair. Why are you doing this? Why are you picking on Joel? That boy never had a chance in life. And Sousa thought that this response meant that, like, Joel had some sort of personality neurological disorder or something. Like, he thought that was, like, a weird statement to make. But it also told him that it was clear she was not going to give up her son. Burke then asked her what her son had been living on. Quote, I don't know what he's living on, and I don't think he has a job yet. He hasn't been using his checking account or Visa card. They asked to see Joel's financial records, and she reluctantly let them. Bitch, do you know, like, they have no, like, you could say, you know what, you come back in here with a warrant. Like, why would you just let them look at those? Anyway, after looking at his records, it showed that Joel hadn't written a check since June 3rd. And Burke then asked her again, like, if she would contact her son and tell him that it was very urgent that, you know, he contact them. Quote, I'm telling you, I have no way to contact him. He used to carry a pager, but now when you call, it just makes a funny noise. And that was my only source of communication with him. So they left, but not before Detective Burke told Judy, quote, okay, Miss Radisich, we're giving you a chance. I only hope he's unharmed, that's all. I suggest that if you talk to your son, you have him contact us immediately. 6 months after the murder, 6 months, on Tuesday, October 6th, Dana publicly announced that he was matching the $25,000 reward that the Yule family had set up for, you know, any information on the case, bringing the grand total to $75,000. On October 23rd, still not hearing from Joel and never being able to contact him, Sousa called Joel's father, Dr. Nick Dickhead Radisich, in Atlanta, Georgia. Nick demanded to know what they had spoken to his son about, and Sousa said, well, spoke to him in regard to a homicide investigation. I'm a homicide detective. Quote, well, I don't know what you did to him, but whatever it was, he hasn't been the same since. So after Sousa had called Dr. Radisich, he received a tip from an anonymous caller that let him know, like, yo, just so you know, Dana just flew off to Switzerland. And of course, right, Sousa's like, fuck, like, he just flew off. Like, he's gone. But after checking, they saw that Dana had bought a round-trip ticket, and he actually returned a week later. Sousa thought, like, what did he go there for? Maybe to put, like, some money in, like, some bogus Swiss accounts or something? But Sousa then got a call from a private investigator working out of New York. The PI said that he was working for an attorney who was in the employ of an expatriate named Mark Rich. Apparently Sousa knew who this guy was. He had, I guess, fled the country on several, like, federal tax evasion charges and was living, like, still as a fugitive in Switzerland. But apparently, when Dana had flown to Switzerland, he had gone to Zurich applying for a position for Mark Rich's company. However, right when the PI ran, like, the standard background check on Dana and saw that he was, like, at least being looked at or whatever in, like, this homicide investigation, like, that's why he had to call up Sousa and be like, yo, what the fuck? Like, is this real? And Sousa just said, quote, that's Dana. Want to give him a job? The next day, right, detectives gathered for their usual strategy meeting, kind of conferring with each other, any updates, what they found out, and all that stuff. And at this point in time, right, like, they knew, like, all these rumors, CIA involvement, drug smuggling, all this nonsense, they're all dead ends. We're going to completely cut that line of investigation in this. Detective Burke did say that they had their sights on Dana, though. Quote, and we have the kid, stands to collect millions, acting pretty damn gleeful, pretty giddy for a grieving son. Something's up with him, I'm telling you. And Sousa added on to this, quote, "This dude is by all accounts obsessed with money, obsessed with the billionaire boys club, as if killers are someone to worship, brazen and conniving enough to let the newspapers print a bunch of crap about him being a self-made millionaire. His own uncles are concerned that he might be involved. Shit, he just isn't acting right for a situation like this." And Burke added on even after that, quote, "Usually when we talk to someone whose friend or relative is a killer, the proof is there. These people go, no way he could do such a thing. But with Dana, we keep interviewing people who say something like, Dana? Yeah, I could see him planning this." They also talked about how at this point in time, they were eyeing Joel as the trigger man that Dana had hired to take out his family. And they based this on, Joel's phony alibi, and the fact that he was living with Dana, or at least did for a short period of time. They still had not been able, to get in contact with Joel, though, as I mentioned earlier, and Joel had canceled his pager service. So Lieutenant White, who was running this meeting, then suggested, okay, if we're going to look at these two, what we need is a financial link between Joel and Dana. That will give us the leverage we need, right, to start digging into this, getting warrants or whatever it is that we need, right? And they needed some sort of financial link as if, Dana had paid Joel for a job or something, right? So that's what they had to look for. And Lieutenant White said that they needed to prove that at least one of them had a 9mm to boost their case. So after this meeting, Sousa paid Boudreaux a visit, seeing how he had been faring. He was still, even 6 months later, trying to figure out, the weapon, the silencer, and all that stuff, right? So the only thing he had concluded at this point in time was that, right, all 6 bullets had been fired from the same weapon, and he had, blown up large pictures of, the bullets and, the marks they had in his office, and, even Sousa was just damn, dude, they look, literally identical. It's creepy. Boudreaux also said that he and that ATF expert, Radisich, had ruled out that those marks on the bullets had been caused by corrosion in the barrel, because if that was so, with each shot fired, there'd be a little bit of rust or corrosion in the bullets, and they'd all be slightly different, but these bullets were all exactly the same. So yeah, at this point in time, he was 100% convinced that a silencer had indeed been used. But the problem was he was still trying to find that perfect combination of weapon and silencer. Yeah, because there's a lot of different weapons and a lot of different types of silencers, right? He described it as a needle in a haystack. Quote, "As I said, if we can't produce the murder weapon, I've got to attempt to replicate the murder bullets somehow. I'm experimenting with a 9mm from property." And with that, Sousa left Boudreaux to continue his work, and we will get more into his work later on. So Sousa's next step was to secure a search warrant from the company who had provided Joel's pager service. And so, he did, and he was able to discover that Joel had originally ordered the service with a Northern California number in November of 1991. Or October of 1991. And a few months later, he had switched to a Southern California area code, and that's when he had the Killa JR number. And on July 1st, 1992, that is when Joel had canceled the pager service. The company said that they received the pager in the mail a few weeks later, and in return, they sent Joel his $200 security deposit back. The company faxed Sousa, right, all this information, all the documentation and whatnot. And when the check for the original $200 security deposit came back, on the back were both Joel and Dana's name. This was the financial link that they needed. So now that they had their link, Sousa and Burke decided to go back to SCU and start really digging in on Dana and Joel. Sousa primarily worked on finding stuff out about Dana, and Burke ended up working on finding out more about Joel. Sousa talked to a student who lived in the same dorms as Dana, and they told Sousa, quote, "One funny thing, Dana was always coming over to use my phone. Had a phone in his own damn room, but a lot of the time he said he needed mine. Never really explained why." Another dorm resident that Sousa spoke with was David DeBono, and he had met Dana at SCU in 1990, and he was the dorm's resident assistant, and he explained that his role was pretty much to kind of get like a feel of the community, the environment of the dorms, who's hanging out with who and whatnot. And he noted that Dana and Joel were, they were stuck together like glue. They were always together. He also told Sousa that Dana had told him what he had told so many others, that he was a self-made millionaire, had bought a failing business called Western Piper and turned it around. And he said it was quite early in the semester when, Dana told him all this. And he said that Dana told him he had sold Western Piper for a huge profit. Quote, he told me he made $2 million to $3 million on the deal. Dana also told David that his father was the vice president of Shearson Lehman, which was a huge, major stock brokerage firm in New York City. David also told Sousa a little bit about Joel. Joel, kind of the opposite of Dana. He said whereas Dana was very, polite, charismatic, put together, very clean, Joel was very rude, very antagonistic, unhygienic. David said that he one time saw, Joel spit like an apple in the hallway. And one time in the cafeteria, he saw Joel take a handful of a public salad bowl, right? At a public salad bowl. Goodness, I cannot speak. A public salad bowl at a public salad bar. He took a handful of it, sniffed it, and then put it back. What the fuck? That is so gross. What the fuck? Why? That was so gross. So yeah, that's kind of what Sousa was digging up. And let's get to Burke, because we're going to find out a little bit more about Joel. He actually had some friends at SCU. Not just friends, he had some girls that were looking at him. I don't get it, but yeah, let's get into that. So, like we said, right, Joel's social circle was not nearly as large as Dana, and at first, Burke had a lot of trouble finding acquaintances, friends, or anyone who knew Joel at all. But more than that, even the few friends that Joel did have, he was not an open book. He was a very closed, reserved person, never spoke about personal things, his family, or anything. So even the friends he did have didn't really know a lot about him. He was described by his few friends as being loyal, maybe even to a fault. He was described as socially awkward, a social misfit even. However, Burke did manage to find quite a few women who had nothing but nice, charming things to say about Joel. Fellow SCU student Michelle Diepenbrock was arguably the closest to Joel outside of Dana, and she told Detective Burke that despite them being pretty close, Joel rarely, if ever, shared any kind of private, intimate detail about himself. Not going into detail about his family, not even going into stuff about himself, his goals, his dreams, or anything like that. She knew him as a polite, joking, loyal type of person. She said he worked out religiously, followed a strict diet. He was a vegetarian. Although she did note that he always ate with his fingers rather than a fork. She said she didn't know much about his family, just, quote, that there was deep-seated hate and anger. I asked him a lot of questions about him, Joel's father. There was a lot of anger and irreconcilable differences. She described Joel's character as shady, but later, clarified what she meant by that. Quote, I did, but by shady, I mean he's mysterious, internalized, closed, shut down. She said that he would even leave $100 bills in her coat pocket as a sweet surprise. And she added that her parents loved Joel. They thought he was polite and handsome, and he had stayed with Michelle for a little bit at her parents' house, and they loved him. She also said that one time when Joel was staying at her house, he asked her to be his girlfriend. Quote, we were hanging out. He was very nervous. He started to sweat on his forehead, and he just sort of clumsily asked me if I wanted to be his girlfriend. It was very sweet, very endearing, and he was very sincere. I said no, and he was fine. Burke found another female SCU student, Jennifer Nunakoven McDonald, and she knew both Dana and Joel. And she described Dana as charming and polished, but she didn't really know him too well. And that was because she had eyes for Joel. By the way, sorry if you hear the lawnmower going in the background. She described her infatuation with Joel, saying that she absolutely trusted him. But she soon found out that what she wanted from Joel was something that he couldn't really give to her. And she explained to Detective Burke that Joel did not like to be touched, saying that he couldn't really feel it. She also told the detective how Joel had aspirations to be extremely wealthy, but she personally didn't think that was ever going to happen. Quote, that's right, I think it takes a certain selfishness to be extremely wealthy, and I don't think Joel had that. There was another SCU student, a girl, who also had a thing for Joel. Her name was Michelle Gamble. She said she met Joel when he helped her coach her all-women's intramural football team, and she described what she felt for Joel. Quote, I wasn't infatuated with him. We were good friends, and I really liked him, and I was physically attracted to him. And she said what, many others had already said, that though she considered them pretty close friends, Joel never said anything like personal or intimate about himself. He would never speak about his family or any of that. And she said whenever she would try to broach that subject and ask Joel about it, he would just say that he didn't want to talk about it. Quote, about all I know about his family is that he has twin little sisters and some brothers. That's really all I know. And she said her relationship with Joel never progressed to like a physical or romantic level, despite her professing her feelings for him. She said he even stayed with her for a couple of weeks one time during school break, and they even slept in the same bed together. Quote, it was like going to bed with my brother. He slept on one side, I slept on the other. Burke also talked to a girl named Jennifer Wallace. She did not attend SCU, but she partied there as a 16-year-old. She told Burke that she met Joel when she was dating his dorm mate, Brian Perkins. I know, I don't even want to get to it. A college-age dude dating a 16-year-old, but whatever. And she said her and Joel remained friends even after her and Brian broke up. She said Joel would take care of her and watch out over her when she'd had too much to drink, and he never tried to like creep on her or anything. Joel had even spent one Easter break at Jennifer's home, and her parents loved him as well. In 1992, quote, he sent me a beautiful framed picture of Marilyn Monroe, so I sent him a thank you card and said Happy Easter. She said she had drawn a bunny on the envelope and had written, quote, just a quick note to say hi. How's school? Hope you did well on that test you were telling me about. I've got a test too and better jam. Love, Jen. Another SCU student, another woman who had befriended Joel, was Bridget Shearer. And she echoed much of what Jennifer Wallace and Michelle had said about Joel, that he did a lot of like sweet, kind things for her. She said that Joel even stayed up late formatting and printing her English paper as she slept. She added that though she thought Joel was sweet, she also described him as socially inept. And when she was asked if it was sort of like weird if Joel dated someone, she said, quote, yes, I could never picture Joel in that kind of situation. She reiterated just how small of a social circle Joel had. She recalled at the end of one semester, right, everyone was making plans to get back home, right, because they kick you out of the dorms, right? Everyone was making plans except for Joel. And with an hour to go before they would be booted out of the dorms, she said Joel had overheard a group of guys talking about driving back to SoCal to go back home, and Joel asked to bum a ride for him. Quote, that's how he got home. It always struck me as kind of sad. Burke also managed to track down Joel's former roommate, Brian Perkins, who thinks it's a great idea to date a 16-year-old while in college. And Brian was actually the lead idiot who suggested that prank by stealing the dorm furniture. He said Joel and some friends were drinking one night, and they just got this, like, hilarious idea to, like, break into the dorms and, like, steal furniture or some shit. He asked Joel to let him in from the inside, and Joel agreed. So I was a little confused on that, if, like, maybe it was, like, a common area they were trying to break into or something, because, like, Brian was Joel's dorm mate, so I don't know the setup or anything like that, but that's what Brian told Detective Burke. But when everything got busted, Brian said his and Joel's friendship, like, ended at that. Joel thought Brian had, like, betrayed him. Not sure, like, why he thought that. And in the end, Michelle, Bridget, and Jennifer Wallace all told Detective Burke they did not know Dana Ewell. They never saw Joel with Dana, had never met him, and Joel never talked about him. They also said they didn't know where Joel worked or how to get a hold of him. He always contacted them, oftentimes from a payphone. And Jennifer Nunakoven McDonald was the only one that Burke talked to who said that Joel didn't call her from a payphone that she was aware of. And she was the only one to know that Joel and Dana were friends. He also spoke with Patricia Kustrun. She was the Associate Director of Housing at SCU. She informed him just how close Joel and Dana were, how close they had gotten and how fast within like the first few weeks of meeting each other. They actually lived on the same floor and their dorms were like just around the corner from each other. She told Burke, quote, if Joel did not eat with Dana, he did not eat with anyone. Now, interestingly enough, right, when Joel's first semester at SCU, when he was moving into the Casa Italiana dorm, it was actually brand spanking new, all right? It was like the inaugural ceremony for this dorm. So Joel was one of the first wave of students to stay in this dorm. And, you know, he and a lot of students moved in on like the inaugural day, right? And Patricia commented, as others already had, right, that like Dana always, we talked about it, right? Dressed in suits, polos and all that. Joel dressed way down, and Patricia said when she first saw Joel, she thought he was like some homeless guy who had wandered on campus. She said he was very disrespectful towards the dorm staff and didn't even bother to dress up when that night the dorm hosted a thank you dinner for the donors for donating the dorm, and Joel didn't even dress up. Burke would talk to another person who was a little bit aware of Dana and Joel's association. It was actually Tiffany's best friend, Susan Young. Susan had spent a week with the Yules at their beach home while Joel was there. Quote, they were off by themselves. They seemed not to want to spend time with the family, saying that, all the time, those two just kind of went off on their own, didn't really associate or, talk with anyone or anything like that. After even more digging, Detective Burke managed to come across someone named Tom Duong. He lived in San Jose, and Tom was like a pretty straight and narrow type of guy. He was an ROTC candidate, and he would end up becoming an officer stationed in Arkansas in the Air Force. Now, Joel had stayed at the Duongs in late summer of 1991. Now, while he had been staying there, Joel had asked Tom, hey, can I have some stuff sent to your house? And Tom's like, yeah, dude, I don't care. Go for it. Joel said it was just some magazines and stuff, and to please not open any packages. One time, though, Tom accidentally did open one of these packages. Quote, I opened up this box, and it was this whole assortment of Soldier of Fortune type magazines. I was pretty mad, and I told him about it. Burke spoke with Tom's mother, Hop Duong, and she said that Joel had come by her house to pick up, some blankets and some other stuff that he had left there, and he had showed up with who she would later identify as Dana, who drove a metallic Mercedes and wore an expensive-looking suit. So all, Joel received 18 magazines / manuals / books and 3 videotapes at the Duongs. He even placed one order under Tom's little brother's name. And later, right, when Burke and Sousa would meet up, Burke relayed to Sousa what Tom had told him. Quote, fringe handbooks on making homemade weapons, explosive devices, and here we go, on building silencers. Duong claims he was pissed, Joel sending that crap to his parents' house. He apparently bitched Joel up and down, and Joel apologized. Duong said one book cover featured a big photo of a weapon with a homemade silencer. One more thing. Before Joel moved out, he asked Duong if he had any weapons for sale, or if he knew someone who did. Yeah, so that is definitely a string that they are pulling, right? And they're getting some interesting results. Now, let's go back to Dana. So, as promised, Berman, remember, Dana's defense attorney now, sent a letter to the Fresno Sheriff's Office, and it came around in the end of October. And it said, in part, quote, Dana Ewell adamantly denies any participation in this heinous crime. He has cooperated with you in spite of the fact that he considers your investigation and innuendos to be unprofessional and offensive. If you intend to prosecute Dana Ewell, there are legal proceedings. If you intend to just harm him by rumor and innuendo, please be advised that he is prepared to seek every legal remedy for your actions. And on November 1st, Berman actually sent a copy of this letter to the Fresno Bee. And he also said to the paper that the police needed to come out and say that Dana was not a suspect. So you see, right, during the past 6 months since the murders, right, people were still talking about it. And there were still stories in the paper about it. And so if you were following the case and reading the articles, it was super, super clear and obvious that Dana was suspect number 1. And this, of course, did not go unnoticed by Dana and Berman, hence the ruthless PR campaign, right? Berman publicly stated his client's innocence, and he did interviews with any and all media, accused the police of harassment and defamation, and in a written response to the Bee, who had inquired about, the police's suspicion of Dana, Berman accused investigators of, quote, repeatedly defaming Dana Ewell and his reputation by leaving the impression with his friends, business associates, and his college community that he is a suspect in this horrible crime. Dana feels that he is being scapegoated because the investigators have been completely ineffective in finding and prosecuting those responsible. If, in fact, the sheriff's office is not intending to spread these rumors, then they should make it clear on the record that Dana is not a suspect. He went on with more accusations against Fresno detectives, saying that they were harassing his client, constantly following him around, surveilling his movements, which, they were. Berman claimed that one time Dana called Santa Clara authorities because there were 2 men following him. And when the Santa Clara authorities, confronted the men, they were Fresno detectives. So in response to all of this, Sheriff Megarian and Captain Kenneth Hogue said Dana was not a formal suspect, but said that he hadn't been ruled out, despite the fact that Dana was not in Fresno. Quote, "We're looking at everybody, including family members. It's a very complex case." Dowling told the paper that police told him that Dana was, quote, "has not been ruled out as a suspect, but that they don't really have anything on him." This article also contained the information about all those bogus, phony articles about Dana. This was the first time the public got scent of that. And also, for the first time in this article, Joel's full name was printed, and it was stated in this article that he was wanted for questioning by Fresno authorities. Now, remember Rosa, or Juanita, the Ewell's housekeeper? Well, after this article in the Bee came out, she phoned up Detective Sousa, and she had some interesting things to tell him. So, Rose had continued cleaning the Ewell home after Dana had moved back in, and she herself witnessed Joel living in the house. Specifically, he was living in the master bedroom. And Dana was, of course, occupying his own bedroom. She said Dana had introduced her to Joel, and at this time, Joel's hair was cut very short and was dyed very dark. And she had found empty hair dye bottles and latex gloves and hair trimmings in the master bathroom trash. So yeah, Joel was obviously trying to alter his appearance, I guess. Additionally, she said on one of the nightstands in Dana's room, there was a pistol, while on one of the nightstands in the master bedroom, where Joel was staying, was a handgun. She said on the stove in the kitchen, in a pot, it looked like there were ashes in there, like they had burned paper or something. And she said at one point in time, she observed Dana and Joel, like, studying a map. Now, she said right after this article in the Bee came out, Dana had called her up and said that her services were no longer needed, telling her, quote, that he doesn't need us, that he's going to sell the house. A few days after this, Dana called her back up and said, "Oh, JK, I actually do need your services again." And Rose said when she went back to the house to clean, by that point in time, Joel had moved out. However, Rose's granddaughter, Christine Cedillo, who did help with Rose with the cleaning, said that after the article, she herself did observe Joel in the house. Also, in this article, all right, that ran in the Bee, the newspaper also talked to Michael Poindexter, and he told them about his discussion with the detectives. Quote, "He told me, we're trying to clear Dana, but I told him, no, you're not. You're trying to nail him. They acted like I had done it, and I thought, right, he's going to hire a friend to get it done cheap." And with that, ladies and gents, we will end part 2. Oh my god, like, can you believe this? Like, dude, we'll get into it. We're really gonna get into the juicy stuff in part 3. Like, we're gonna get into, like, their surveillance and, like, all that. There's so much to come. I haven't even gotten into, like, a lot of Dana's cunty behavior. Like, just you wait, man. It gets so much juicier. There are just so many just twists and turns, and there's just so much audaciousness in this case. And you'd think that this asshole, if you're gonna, like, go through all this effort to take out your family, like, maybe you should have taken some classes in, like, how to act like a human. Because it's Dana's own behavior that got him looked at, you know? Like, it just cracks me up. As a reminder, this was the book I read, Catch Me If You Can, by Craig Hanadell. And remember, this was a requested case. It was requested by @HeyHeyYou, but I know that you commented and said that YouTube made you change your name. I promise I will look for your comment, and I will shout you out proper in part 3. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I want to know what you guys think so far. Like, isn't this wild? This is just wild. Like, a little rich, spoiled bitch still can't be satisfied with, like, being the son of a millionaire, you know? Getting all the head start that you need in life to be successful. And he's still a loser. It's just incredible. Alrighty, guys, I will let you go. So yeah, remember, plan is right now is I will air part 3 next Tuesday. And then 2 weeks from that, I'll do part 4. Like, we'll go to our regular schedule. Like I said, my father-in-law's stroke and now dementia diagnosis just really threw everything into chaos. And we're just kind of kind of going through the motions, just kind of going with it. Alrighty, I will go ahead and let y'all go. I've got a lot to do. I will see you next week for part 3. And yeah, until we meet again, take care of yourself. Remember, don't be a dick. Being a dick to dicks, that's fine. But like, just don't start being an asshole or a dick to someone who like, you know, didn't do anything to you. You know what I mean? Leave a little sparkle wherever you go. Alrighty, guys. I think that's it. I will see you next week for part 3 of the Dana Ewell case. Bye-bye.